on the screen. But if you look at that purple area that's kind of a triangular shape, that's the municipal airport. And the area between that and the railroad tracks is designated industrial. So what this is saying is that the vision for Gardner is that it be developed in an industrial way up along U.S. Old Highway 56 and north of the railroad tracks, and developed residentially in the area on the east side of Waverly.
Before we move on from there,
okay, sure.
I think it would also be worth noting that the Southwest Johnson County Area Plan is also looking at this area and nearing completion of a new land use scenario for this area. That plan is being done in conjunction with the City of Gardner, City of Edgerton, Johnson County, Mid-America Regional Council, and the Kansas Department of Transportation. So that should be coming to a close sometime within the next couple of months, because it's supposed to be finished before the intermodal facility opens in September.
You said that's work underway?
Yes. So far they've come up with several draft land use scenarios, kind of narrowed in on one that we think is sort of the preferred land use scenario. They're currently doing transportation modeling based on that scenario and preparing a final draft of the report, which should hopefully be available within about a month.
Who's representing Gardner on that? Because I don't think any of the planning commissioners have been involved in any of that.
Commissioner Pop was on the advisory committee, and Commissioner Copeland was on the advisory committee as a citizen representative. And then staff representatives include myself and Tim McEldowney, the city engineer.
Okay. Do we need to replace those?
Yes, also our city council representative was Randy Gregorczyk, who's no longer on the council. So that was a topic at our meeting last week that I brought up, was that we're going to need to look at replacements, which is a shame this late in the process to replace on the advisory committee, but the same situation is also the case in Edgerton, so I think that's just something they need to deal with at the plan level as to how we want to handle that.
And I might add, it might seem to be appropriate to report on that plan in the near future. Just the land use maps and the scenarios are pretty interesting.
And there will be another public meeting, I believe, coming up in probably a month, maybe a month and a half.
So this is a very specific example of how the comprehensive plan is used as it relates to zoning decisions. So the Planning Commission will occasionally be, well, they will be confronted by rezone applications, conditional use applications, special use permit applications. And under any of those applications, the criteria that's used to make a decision is in this section of the zoning ordinance. And I'll just recite it. In considering any application for rezoning request, conditional use permit or special use permit, the Planning Commission and the governing body may give consideration to the criteria stated below to the extent that they are pertinent to the particular application. In addition, the Planning Commission and governing body may consider other factors which may be relevant to a particular application. So there are several criteria. I think it goes A through H, I believe, or something, or A through J, perhaps. The first one is the conformance of the proposed use to the community development plan and other adopted planning policies. So this gives you a real example of the importance of the community development plan to the decisions that you will be confronted with. So the comprehensive plan update, it's been recognized that there's a need for that. We actually published an RFP, a request for proposals, in March, and we received several proposals. We had an interview process, selection process, and the city staff has selected Houseo Levine Associates for contract negotiation. The staff, city administrator, do not have the authority to approve a contract like this. That authority rests with the city council. So we will be presenting to the City Council soon a draft contract with this firm to help guide us through the process of drafting and hopefully adopting a comprehensive plan. So the next steps, contract, project initiation, and outreach. The Planning Commission will certainly be engaged in one way or another. They'll have representation on a committee or be engaged in other ways as well. It's important that the Planning Commission take part in this. It's an important duty of the Planning Commission. This slide is just an overview of their scope of work. It's kind of typical that a planning process looks like this. Existing conditions, visioning, identification of goals and objectives, and then drafting a plan that addresses those. And then that goes through plan documents and adoption. And the implementation is really important. Implementation, you'll hear this a lot probably, but implementation of a long-range plan is done by zoning, subdivision regulations, other regulations, physical projects, programs. So some of the examples of the work that Houseville-Levine has done for other communities, they actually won an American Planning Association award for their comprehensive plan that they did for the village of Downers Grove, which is a suburb of Chicago. They've also done some other some plans for other distinctly different communities like Muskogee, Oklahoma, and Marion, Iowa. And they have a long list of others that they've done. Any questions about the comprehensive plan update? You want me to move on? I can certainly move on. Current sign regulations. A lot of people are affected by sign code. When a business opens a business in the city, one of the things that they have to do is get a sign permit for their sign. Usually there's a lot to be done when you're trying to open a business in a city. There's a lot of expenses. One of the last things that a person usually thinks about is the sign and getting a sign permit. Creates a lot of anxiety when someone applies for a sign permit and then they don't get the sign permit they need, or they don't feel like they have adequate identification. So it touches a lot of people. The current sign regulations are confusing, and I think a lot of people will agree with that. They certainly, I find them confusing. I have a background that involves a lot of sign permitting and sign variances and that type of thing in my previous work, and I find it confusing and inconsistent. It's impractical and inflexible. In some instances, the sign regulations do not appear to meet the legal test of constitutionality. For example, freedom of expression. A good sign code will be relatively content neutral, and there's a kind of a fine line between what can be regulated in terms of content and what can. Amy probably can speak more specifically to that, and if you want, you can. Is there anything you'd like to add to that?
Probably not at this time, but as we dive into the regulations in more detail, I think that'll be an important topic to consider is how we're regulating the content. I guess our current regulations, for example, you have real estate signs are treated differently from, similar other types of signs, and that's the type of thing that is really sort of a questionable practice. And so we're hoping that our new regulations will follow the letter of the law with regards to how that's regulated.
So it's something it's very easy to make a mistake when you're adopting sign regulations, and so it's something that requires a lot of oversight. Sign code is a source of many stakeholder complaints. I think a lot of people, you might have heard those complaints yourselves. I've just thrown in an example. The way the sign code is organized, it's by zone, which is not unusual. For the R1 zone, which is a single-family residential zone, there are standards that apply. Where you have a